I'm Kathy Newcomer, and I am delighted to meet you. I am in the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration at the George Washington University, where we've been preparing people to be leaders in public service for way even longer than I've been there. We've had our MPA since 1963, and we have lots of our alumni who are out doing wonderful things, both in government, a lot in the federal government, but also in the nonprofit sector, as well as in public services in the private sector. And one of the topics that our students, our master's and PhD students, are definitely going to be exposed to is grants management. Because as you know, at least the people on this call know, a lot of people out there do not know that grants represent a huge amount, more even than we pay, that is the federal government pays in contracts and procurement, goes to grants, a huge billions of dollars. And important topic. And so our school and myself, I teach about it and the importance of grants management. It just seemed like the right thing to do to partner with REI to advance practice, advance community building and knowledge about how to do it well. And so I'm really excited today, particularly because I know one of the speakers extremely well, to be part of this presentation. So I'm going to pass it over to my partner in this, Jeff Myers, who is with REI, and he will welcome you as well. So on behalf of GW, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I want to emphasize we started this, and I think it was a great thing that George Washington University agreed to partner on this, because we wanted to try and help build the grant management community and to strengthen the kind of the knowledge, create networks and people you can refer to if you want to say, will this work, or how did that work in terms of grant management. It was kind of funny because as I was having several conversations before we started these, there were several folks who said, yeah, I'd love to get involved. I want to learn about how to get more grants. But it's something where we want to try and kind of balance the perspective of the grant recipient with the grant maker, who will want to be able to kind of get more mission achievement and more effectiveness out of the grant dollars that are dispersed. So that's really the way that we created these. Ideally, they will start again happening in person, where you can meet each other and we can meet you, and you can kind of extend your network of people who can help you solve problems. I'm going to give kind of just a very quick overview of REI and then introduce our speakers. For those of you who are not familiar with REI systems, we help agencies improve granting, both efficiency in the management of grants and administration activities, as well as results. We're particularly proud recently that we've helped the Health Resources and Services Administration go from the passage of the CARES Act for COVID treatment to issuing grants that were first authorized by that act 12 days later. And it didn't just happen in all those 12 days with people working 24 hours a day. There was a lot of kind of planning in advance. How can we accommodate an unplanned grant program that arises? And I think that actual lesson is going to be quite valuable. We may see if we can get someone from HRSA to speak about that, because you know what? In the infrastructure legislation and some of the budget reconciliation acts, there are a bunch of spending that are going to be in new program areas that may be, of course, with new recipients and perhaps as well new grantors that may need to move quite quickly. We're also pleased, we've been working with NASA for more than 30 years, and an example of what we do to help measure results, we're helping NASA measure the impact of its grants both on space exploration. Some of their grantees have provided technology used in the Mars rover, but also for job growth and small business entrepreneurship success, economic growth here on Earth. And so we're very proud that we're helping our clients succeed in those areas. Last, we're recruiting. So if there are folks who are really interested in helping a variety of different government agencies at both the federal, the state, local, as well as the nonprofit level, succeed and be more effective in grants, and you're interested in career opportunities, please contact me. Let me last make one plug, which is that George Washington University, the National Grants Management Association, and REI conduct an annual grants survey. And it's basically to give you all a collective voice to kind of help make sure that the government policymakers hear, understand, and act upon the concerns that you express. We've made it a little bit shorter, so hopefully it'll be a little briefer. It should be taking you perhaps 12, at most 15 minutes to complete. And we'll be sending out that survey invitation in early November. Anybody who gets the link is welcome to respond. So if you don't get the link for some reason, goes into your spam box, or we don't have a way to contact you, you can get it from a friend. You can look at NGMA, you can look on REI's website, perhaps even on GWU's website. With all that underway, let me give a great shout out and thank you to the members of the Quality Shared Services Management Office, the QSMO within HHS. They are leading ways to both help think through and collaborate and implement better ways and better tools to manage grants. They're going to be presenting for you here today, and they include Chad Clifford, the Executive Director of the QSMO, who has, of course, in addition to his experience at HHS, experience with the Office of Management Budget, overseeing grant policy, as well as in a grant-making roles at FEMA. He is accompanied by Andrea Sampanis, as Kathy's hinted. Andrea is a product of the Master in Public Administration program at GWU, and also has some significant experience both with the Navy and with the General Services Administration. And finally, Mary Beth Foley has more than 10 years of experience in financial management at HHS, the largest grant-making agency in government. But she's also got experience with the Navy in an operating role and at the Naval Academy as well. So please join me in thanking all of them. They will make a presentation for 25 to 30 minutes and then be available to answer your questions, so we can unmute you if you'd like to ask them a question. You are welcome to type any question or comment you have. We'd ask you to type it into the chat box. There's an opportunity to use the questions or the chat box. The panelists at the same time they're presenting can't see the questions but can see the chat. So they may be able to answer real time, or we can say, hey, you know what, there have been 3 questions that have come up on this topic. Let's make sure that one's first out of the gate when they finish their presentation and start answering the questions and providing more details as you'd like. So with that all underway, we look forward to the presentation. Chad, do you want to take it from here?
Sure, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Kathy. Really appreciate the forum here with REI and NGW to give us an opportunity to connect with our grants management community. Sort of as this was advertised and as the topic states on the slide, we're here to talk about the Grants Quality Service Management Office and really how we utilize and prioritize customer experience to really help deliver results as we look to modernize the systems landscape to really help applicants and recipients thinking about that user and customer perspective to help enable them to drive better results for grants. And I do say, you mentioned Audrey went to GW, and I'm going to give one plug as well. I am also a proud grad of the George Washington University. I went there for law school, came to DC, as sort of Kathy mentioned, people do, right? They come for public service and they go to GW for that. And that's exactly why I went to GW. I always wanted to work in public service. It's been a passion for me for my most of my adult life. And I never left. And I'm still here. Before we jump into the slides and the agenda, Jeff mentioned sort of my prior career and how I got to where I am today in getting to lead this fabulous team in this sort of space, in this amazing mission. And grants is a huge mission in government. It's over $1 trillion a year, so it's a pretty big deal in what the government's trying to do to deliver impact in the lives of Americans, and even with foreign grants around the world. And really, it's essential, right, that both the federal government and the recipients, right, who are really the implementers of the grants, have the best tools possible to help them deliver on that critical mission. For me, customer experience is something I really found as a lawyer, during my legal days. And Jeff mentioned I worked at FEMA. I worked very closely with many grant programs at FEMA, especially in the disaster response field. And I had really amazing opportunities to deal both with programmatic staff in DC. I got to travel out in the field with many opportunities and work very closely with folks on the ground in disaster zones, helping communities recover. And I also got to work with recipients and sub-recipients, at the local level with attorneys, policymakers, local leaders, engineers. And what was really fascinating was just seeing how both from a systems and policy structure, how challenging sometimes it can be to deliver on the grants mission, both from the agency grants manager perspective, as well as from the recipient perspective. And that really opened up, I think, my viewpoint in terms of what impact, at GW, we talk about what type of impact we can have in the world. And for me, that really resonated, and I thought about, well, wow, if we can give better tools for such a big mission, maybe we can impact some real change, right? And really help give back, right, in that public service mode that we're trying to do. So that's what motivates me, and that's why I'm here today. So let's talk about sort of how we're trying to do that. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so quick agenda. We're going to give an overview today of the grants QSMO. I'll do this part. Then I'm going to hand it off to my solutions and services lead, Andrea Sampanis, and she'll talk about one tool and one way we're trying to help address and improve that experience, particularly for recipients, by helping create a more seamless recipient user experience and a web portal and dashboard that we have prototyped and are trying to create to help do that, to ease the administrative burden for recipients to access and utilize the systems they need to use. Mary Beth Foley will talk about our grants QSMO marketplace and the marketplace validation process, and she is our customer engagement lead. And then finally, we're gonna just talk about some technical things going on with Dunn's UI transition, and we'll be open to questions along the way. I tell the team every day, and I tell every stakeholder, whether you are a federal agency executive, whether you are a grants policy leader, a CIO, a grants manager at whatever level you are in government or a recipient, the grants QSMO cannot be successful in our mission if we do not seek out and understand your perspectives, your needs, your challenges, and objectives, and then try to incorporate that into our mission, into our priorities, and make sure that we are constantly, revisiting those priorities and making sure that we are addressing the most emergent and critical needs, right, to help you deliver on that mission. So today, we want your questions and really are seeking them out, and I'm very interested to see what you have to say and what you have to ask. All right, next slide, please. All right, overview. Next slide. Thank you. Okay. So here on this slide, we have our mission, or sorry, our vision statement, as well as the three pillars, or the three sort of key roles and activities that we see are our ability to help transform the grants management systems landscape. But really, there's a long statement there. You can read it, and we talk about trying to empower and enable applicants and recipients of federal awarding agencies and those grants managers and leaders to better deliver on that mission, and finding more efficient and effective ways and helping give them more modern and effective tools and functionality to deliver on that mission. But for me, it really boils down more simply to, we are here to help drive improvements and modernization of the shared services grants management landscape. And we think that by focusing on the customer and user experience of the users in those systems, that will really enable and open up the capability to reduce the burden for recipients, to create the efficiencies for awarding agencies, to free up their time to focus on higher value activities, which will help them, drive better results on the grants mission. So really, customer experience for us with the tools and the users in those systems will help give better results if we really focus on improving that experience. So naturally, our three pillars, one of them, the first one, it's in the middle there, it's being responsive to customer needs and really, again, improving that user and customer experience. And that means understanding and seeking out those needs. And I'm going to talk a minute about just how much engagement we do. It is a huge part of our job. And then again, what we're trying to do, we're trying to really ease the burden for recipients. This is something that agencies and system owners and operators in the shared services space try to do. OMB is very interested in this from a federal government-wide perspective. But until the grants QSMO was designated earlier this year, at the start of this year, there really was no single office really committed, in terms of an enterprise-wide perspective with the grants management system to try to focus on reducing that recipient burden. We take that role very seriously, and equally as serious as trying to really create and drive efficiencies and improvements in the tools that our federal agency partners, who are essential stakeholders for us, and really our prime, when you think about customers, and the grants QSMO is trying to stand up a marketplace of shared services and modern solutions. The customers there, in terms of literally buying services off that marketplace, will be our agencies, and the users primarily, will be the agency grants managers, and then of course the recipients that interact with them as well. But also there's a huge opportunity, and this is the third pillar on the right-hand side, where we as a governance entity working with our partners on the marketplace can really drive, both adoption of the grants management standards that are now out. We have version 2.0 of those standard data elements. But once we incorporate those, we can really focus on leveraging that data that the government collects, sharing it across agencies, and really using that as a strategic asset. One of the best ways I've already seen our agency partners and shared service partners doing this on the federal side is a focus on risk management tools. And some of our partners at HHS and at Grant Solutions, which is one of the providers today, they've been working on, and we've been assisting them on in this past fiscal year, a pre-award risk management tool that really does a great job at leveraging the existing data and providing what is essentially business intelligence tools to help federal agencies make better informed decisions about not just how to award a grant, but how to manage a grant over time, thinking of it not just from a binary yes or no we should award, but thinking of it from a more of a risk-based perspective and how we can engage and support and tailor terms and conditions to improve, the possibility and the likelihood of excellent results with a grant award. And for me, that is a huge opportunity that we as Grants QSMO look to try to drive with our solutions in the future. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about the existing landscape. So today, the existing landscape of grants management solutions is rather large, mostly highly customized, and somewhat fragmented across a number of agencies. There is a large volume of grants moving through shared services today. It's, I think, a little bit less than 50% or so. I have to check the figures. But the overall number of systems is large. There's over 300 grant systems utilized by agencies today. A little less than 100 of them are public facing. And that's to implement a $1 trillion grants mission through over 1,500 grant programs from about 45 or 46 awarding agencies. So it's very diverse. So we can see how we arrived today at the point where we have a very large and diverse and highly customized systems landscape. But our vision for the Grants QSMO in the long term is really to try to create a more seamless experience for the recipients, right, who again are the ones implementing the grants. And we can try to do that by, one, shrinking that landscape. We don't see, sort of there being a singular solution for grants management that all agencies must use. I think the highly sort of customized nature of the programs, right, the authorizing statutes, the programmatic requirements, the different natures of the types of grants that agencies deliver on, from research to construction to supporting nonprofits, it's very diverse, and it's unclear to us that a single solution can never be successful. We're going to need multiple types of solutions. But really, we need to narrow that space down, really find ways to create more interoperable solutions for agencies to utilize across the FIPIC framework, that lays out the grants management process, and allow agencies to more find sort of seamless interactions with those systems and those different modules that fit within the FIPIC framework, so that they can move from both pre-award phase to award to post-award management and audit more seamlessly, and also leverage the data and share the data across the federal enterprise and across agencies, obviously, but share it more broadly than it is today. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so I mentioned earlier just how important stakeholder engagement is for us. We have two lines of business. If you look at our organizational chart, one is solutions and one is engagement. And that is, again, because we are focused on helping deliver results for the Fed-wide grants management systems ecosystem, and frankly, for the grants mission. We really believe that the only way to drive the right results is to really think about our stakeholders as customers. And to understand what our customers need, we have to go out and find them and seek them and meet them where they are. And meet them where they are means not just go talk to them and us talk to them. It means us helping inform them, who we are. Hopefully, many folks know about us, but we're still meeting folks who are learning about the QSMO, and that makes sense. It's a very large and diverse landscape of recipients. And really understanding what they need, what are their challenges, what are their priorities and goals, and what are their perspectives, what are the pain points they've encountered so far in the systems they use as they try to manage the grants management process. And we do this routinely with awarding agencies, and we've done this, both through governance groups that we have on the awarding agency side and service provider side, as well as with recipients. We reached out to large organizations, and we have touched many of them. And I know we have some stats here on the slide about the total number of working group meetings, the number of comments and feedback. And we spend a lot of time in engagement, both in large groups and frankly, in one-on-one engagements, understanding that sometimes it's difficult to get real feedback, in short snippets, both with our federal awarding agency partners and customers and our recipients. So we focus a lot too on trying to drill down into the details of that perspective and to really try to understand. And we don't just listen, we try to then incorporate what we learn and sort of what we then sort of are better informed about our stakeholders' needs and challenges into the work we do. And even this past fiscal year, in the 9 months since we've been stood up, we've adjusted, and I'm sort of very proud that our team has been able and very resilient to adjust very quickly to some of the emergent needs that we've seen, both in the Fed agency space and for recipients. With the CARES Act and all the COVID funds, particularly with the American Rescue Plan, there were large increases in grants dollars and many new grant programs and direct payment programs. And the Grants QSMO was very quickly able to pivot, help advise those agencies on their systems needs that resulted from those increases in the new programs. We helped advise on their acquisition, staffing needs, advise on the use of certain types of systems, low-code platforms, push to shared services, and trying to help drive the utilization of those services where feasible within the timeframes we had. And agencies found that very helpful and very responsive to those needs. Second, as even we've been working and developing our marketplace and the marketplace validation process that we're going to use to first assess and get our federal providers onto that marketplace, we try to treat our providers as customers too. And thinking about how, not just that pursuant to OMB Memo 1916, providers will need to be part of our marketplace in the future to make sure that they're part of the shared services landscape. We take sort of that as a secondary approach, and first think about what type of value can we deliver back to our shared service provider partners, right? We should be trying to create a marketplace where we are delivering value for those providers, and the value we're delivering helps them deliver better improvements in delivery for their agency customers and the recipients that they engage with. We're about to go forth and launch our Grants QSMO marketplace this fiscal year. We started the marketplace validation process last fiscal year on time, as we anticipated and planned to do. Very proud of that for Mary Beth and Andre and the team. And we should have our first shared services on the marketplace this first quarter is our plan. And we should have most of them, if not all of them, in the Fed space that plan to be open to new customers on the marketplace by midpoint this fiscal year. And that's in part because we sought out the feedback from our existing Fed partners, right? And use that feedback to help better reform the validation process that we're using, and even how we're structuring our marketplace to make sure, again, that we're delivering value back to the providers so they can really deliver value back to their agency customers and agency and recipient users. And finally, one of the things that I know Andrea is going to talk about is our seamless recipient user experience and a web portal and dashboard prototype we've been working on and we'll hope to build to help improve that recipient experience. That came out of feedback directly from recipients. This was a project that started before I arrived at the Grants QSMO. It was something I actually got to work with the team while I was at OMB back in FY19. But it was something that they saw based on feedback from the community, including from the annual REI GW survey of the grants management community. They asked a question, I think it was in the 2020 survey, where's the greatest opportunity for grants management in the system space? So we're going to focus on sort of one sort of tech tool or aspect. What would be the greatest one that they think would deliver value back and improvements? And I think it was over 70% of respondents or so said that a single web portal for recipients to access, right, those sort of slightly less than 100 public-facing systems seems like the most obvious benefit. To help really sort of just make it easy to log in, make it easy to access the systems, and give them a simple way to find out what's going on with their grants and what to do next. So the team took that and ran with it. And in FY20, we developed a clickable prototype of the RUX portal and dashboard based on human-centered design sessions, again, seeking out perspective of others and our actual users. And we are seeking money from the Technology Modernization Fund, really to drive the build out and development of that. And we're through the first round, and we're waiting to hear back from feedback from the TMF board and waiting for a pitch date meeting, and are very hopeful that it will be able to get those funds and really deliver on those results. So I'm going to stop here. I think I've taken up my allotted time. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, and she's going to give you some more details on some of the work we're doing on that RUX.
Thanks, Chad. We can move to the next slide. So, and again, I really do highly recommend, if you have any questions as I'm speaking, please do put them in the chat. I'm happy to sort of try to keep track, multitask, and track those questions and answer any confusion or specifics that you would like to hear. So, as Chad mentioned, our current environment is pretty fragmented. We have roughly 300 systems, we think, across the grants lifecycle. And we think about a third of those, or 100, are actually recipient facing for all those recipients and applicants on the phone. Current state doesn't look so great. We have multiple logins. We do have some use of shared services, so it's not a dire situation. We're very proud of the move that we've seen to shared services recently, but we know we can do a lot more. On top of that, we know we have some jumping in and out of systems. Sometimes you use a system, other times you're maybe submitting a performance report via email. And that is bad for us because we don't get access to that data. We joke we want to jailbreak the data out of your email, because then it allows us to do a lot more data mining and a lot more analysis. So in the future state, what we're looking to do with the recipient seamless user, or what we call RUX, recipient seamless user experience. We want to centralize your login or your authentication with the use of login.gov. Many of you already have a login.gov username and password, most likely. You're required to if you're using sam.gov, as well as many of our shared service providers also offer that as an option, and we're getting growing use of that too. But then hopefully the goal will be to go through to this RUX portal. It will have a dashboard to help you know what applications and open awards you have, and then be able to click that and get into the system you need to work on. The goal is to not make you as recipients have to remember what grant goes with what system. So I know those because I look at spreadsheets all day long, but if you're NIH, you have an NIH grant, that's ERA. If you have a Treasury grant, that could be Grant Solutions, or it could be a Salesforce solution. Or DoD, maybe there's 16 different options. It depends on which sub-agency you're getting it through. There's no reason why an applicant needs to remember that. We want your time focused on actually doing the mission that the grant is for, rather than remembering logins. One example we saw from Nevada, again, we looked at Nevada because of an REI breakfast series. The CIO at Nevada was part of that and was very great. We've rewatched that presentation many times, and we did a case study of them. We think they have across the life cycle at least 25 systems they're working with, and that doesn't actually include the program oversight systems. Okay, question from the audience. What does RUX stand for? Again, it's our acronym for recipient, the R, user, experience. We sort of cheated and put the X for experience, RUX. That's our goal. It is really one of our big first priorities. Next slide. The reason why it's our first big priority is very much in part due to the GW, NGMA, and REI survey that Jeff mentioned at the top of this call. So please do fill out that survey. We look at it very closely. And again, the reason why we prioritize our RUX portal and initiative is because of the result of the survey. 70% of the respondents said that a unified portal holds the most potential for dramatic impact. And when COVID hit, we were working with OMB, and we were hearing additional feedback from recipients of the scare and stress of, oh my God, it's going to be so bad because we have so many systems. We quickly realized this is what we need to prioritize. We've been doing a lot of human-centered design sessions I'll talk about in a bit, but we've sort of been gathering different quotes we have. The first one being from our dear friend, who's the Director of Grants and Contracts at Alabama Children's Aid Program. I'm not sure if Lisa's on the phone, but she has definitely been a shining light and a true motivator for me personally. In talking with her, she pointed out how difficult it was just to remember all the logins that they have. And that's something that, honestly, as the federal government, it just takes us all working together to agree on one adoption of a login or shared authentication provider. And then that can easily be, well, not easily, because it does take some time to implement, but it's something that makes a massive impact on the recipient experience, because now you can only remember that one username and password with login.gov and let it work throughout. On that, really, after talking with Lisa, we really prioritize that. I joke, the team knows anytime I'm on a call, I'm probably going to bring up use of login.gov. And the great news is we've had a lot of really great improvements over the past year. We think we have about 60% of volume going through login.gov already, between the fantastic use of our shared service providers, which is ERA, Grant Solutions, PMS. sam.gov also uses it, as well as grants.gov. And just this September 30th, NSF went live with it as an option. I think we have some of our transportation colleagues. I know they're dedicated to implementing login.gov. Also, we have education and Treasury who have sort of agreed that in their modernization efforts, they will also be implementing login.gov. And we're tracking everyone else. We have regular calls with them to figure out how we can get further adoption of that. Additionally, on login.gov, the good news is they just received a lot of funding from what's called the Technology Modernization Fund. So we know there are problems. I do want to state that. We know login.gov is not perfect. Quite frankly, no shared service authentication provider is going to be perfect. But the answer is we got to just work together. We are here to share your feedback. We know that there's some problems with the international community and sort of the help desk and some of the sort of the not being able to get SMS text. It's something we've already started talking to login.gov about. And actually, it was part of their request and their rationale of asking for that money in the TMF so they can improve their operations. We're also aware of another issue related to sort of confusion with personal versus work email accounts, and we're working to get a meeting with them to talk to them. So again, please know the QSMO is here to listen. That's why we really are saying if you have questions, or not even questions, but feedback, please do put them in the chat. We download the chat, and it's something we track and sort of mine when we go to have our meetings with all the different providers to make sure we're providing them that customer feedback. In addition, the recipient community just pointed out, again, they reiterated that we were hopefully on the right track, at least according to the human-centered design sessions we did. Many said having that one-stop shop saves them time with issues and logins and figuring out which system they're supposed to be in. Our dear friends at FTP, which is a consortium of many research institutions, we've been meeting with them a lot. We actually just did a demo to them last week, had great feedback. And they said, we've been waiting for this for 20 years. So we hear the excitement. We promise we are working very hard. We need money, so that's another thing I'll talk about in a second. But in the meantime, we're working to get that. I see a question coming in. Is an end user required to create an account on each agency database first, or does the service manage all of this? So creation of an account is, to get a little technical, refers to authorization. So we are going to need to still authorize the accounts. We'll be working with a team. The way we'll do this is in an iterative approach. We'll prioritize high volume systems first. Authorization is still something that will have to be done within each system. There's cybersecurity reasons for that. However, it does mean you won't have to remember your different username and passwords if you're using login.gov and if they connect with login.gov. And how do you connect to grants.gov? Grants.gov has an option also with login.gov. How we will connect, I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so I mentioned again, this is going to be an iterative approach. To a lot of people, this seems very basic, and I get that. But believe it or not, even the basic is really hard because it's 100 systems we have to convince to share data with us and connect to, and to quite frankly use login.gov as an authentication provider. We're not telling these systems that it's the only authentication provider they can use. Some of them have requirements to use their own OCIO directed. I will say though, with the administration approving a lot of the funding for login.gov, it's a huge signal across government that the Biden-Harris administration is very supportive of login.gov. So that's helping us, I think, in this initiative. So it's great news last week when we got that. So single sign-on, the goal is, again, use of login.gov as an option. That allows that sort of token, authentication token, to pass through our UX, through what we are calling our portal. Our goal is to make it as minimally invasive, so sort of as basic and easy to integrate with as possible, because I have to convince 100 systems to work with me to connect and share the data. The goal that we have prototypes a portal. Some of you on the phone, I believe, have done some of the testing with us. We did several human-centered design sessions. We've hit every major group of recipient. Again, a huge shout out to Kathy and Jeff, because they're the ones who helped us get all of those HCD sessions scheduled. And really, we took a lot of that, and then we just kept expanding and consistently doing. We'd update the prototype, do another test, again, update it. It was a very agile development approach. So actually what you see here in the screenshot is that was sort of version 1. I think we're on version 4 at this point. So it looks very different now based on the feedback. But the goal is at the beginning to have a very sort of basic dashboarding where you can see your open applications and your active grants, be able to click on those to manage. It would, the question of how would it connect to grants.gov? It would, when you see an application, if it's an application that's done through grants.gov, when you click on that, it will take you to the grants.gov workspace. I want to be very, very clear. We are not replacing systems. This is not the new version of grants.gov. We will work very closely to collaborate with them and make that as seamless as possible. But our goal right now is just to put a portal that lies on top of these systems. We are not a competitor to Grant Solutions. Grant Solutions is a sister organization to us, and they're a critical part of our RUX experience. Connecting with them is critical, but also I want to bring them up in actually the last sort of the part where my little guy is running, where we have a truly seamless user experience. Because the other part of RUX that's truly just at the base of what we do as the QSMO, and a huge thing Mary Beth is leading, is adoption of the shared services. So we've got, I mentioned 100 systems. Believe it or not, already it's actually 93. And already it's not 93 anymore because Labor just migrated to Grant Solutions. Again, our sister organization that we're very supportive of. So that means Labor will decommission 3 of their systems and go down to 1 that already existed. So now I don't have to connect to their 3. I only have to connect to Grant Solutions, which I was going to do anyways. And they're the largest shared service provider. So that's why they're such a critical partner to us. The more we can push agencies to adopt existing shared services that will be validated on our marketplace, the better that experience is for recipients, because it's overall just fewer systems. That combined with single sign-on through login.gov, and until we get it down to just a few shared services, the portal is required to make that cognitive load easier. I got to be realistic. It's going to take some time for us to get DoD to shrink their landscape. That's a lot of different agencies that often act separately within the government. Mary Beth and I have worked in the Navy, so we're very familiar with DoD. And again, we work with them. I'm not putting them down at all. We have to be realistic about how much time it takes to consolidate systems. System consolidation, when you are working with this critical funding for COVID relief, infrastructure, I mean, so much of what all of you all do is so critical to improving the American taxpayer's life. We have to make sure what we're doing is really thought out and an iterative approach. That's the other thing I was going to note. We really see this portal that we're starting with as being just the beginning of what could be possible in the future. We call it sometimes the platform of the future, because once we get that experience centralized, again, we are not replacing systems. We are just trying to make that experience connected. So you as a recipient don't understand really how fragmented we really are behind the curtain. But once we get that centralized, think about the possibilities. You could possibly create or submit a performance report via a portal instead of putting it in email, where again, that data is locked and we don't have the ability to mine it. So we really think this is a critical step to creating what could be in the future. Next slide. So where we are, as I mentioned, we built a prototype. We have done many, many user-centered design sessions. Thank you to all of those of you on the phone who've helped us. We did the prototype, we updated it. If you want to see the prototype, it's right at the bottom. There's a link in the Vimeo link in this slide. Jeff mentioned we will be sending these slides out. Sometimes we show you, but we are trying to not take up too much time today. And last but not least, we have requested funding from the Technology Modernization Fund. And we're also very exciting. We just last night got results of an RFI. We'll be meeting with several of the small business vendors next week to get their feedback on how we can really do this quickly, ways we can best think about how to architect the RUX portal. And with that, I know I'm over time, so I'm going to hand it over to my dear friend, Mary Beth Foley.
Thanks, Andrea. Actually, before we fully hand off, a question came in while you were talking about the recipient seamless user experience and login.gov saying, is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, using this system? So I want to give you a chance to answer that.
Great question. We do have bi-monthly calls with HUD currently. They have not implemented that yet, but they do have an enterprise agreement with login.gov. So once right now they're looking at all their systems, trying to prioritize which ones they'll put up first. So they are dedicated. We work even with their enterprise architect that would be in charge of it. And what we've seen from NSF, once they decide to go, and since they already have an agreement with GSA, NSF was able to actually implement it within 2 to 3 weeks. So really exciting. I'm glad you asked that because we'll definitely bring that up the next time we meet with them.
All right, terrific. And I know there was one other question regarding does the grants QSMO support state and federal or just federal grants management? So I'll address that in my portion. So next slide. If you aren't already aware, the grants QSMO is not the only QSMO. There were 3 others designated. There is one at Treasury for financial management. There's one at Homeland Security, CISA for cybersecurity, and there's one over at GSA for civilian HR payroll. As you can imagine, there is overlap in many points across the life cycle between the grants QSMO's work and the financial management QSMO. So we do coordinate where it is appropriate, where there's a need. We're actually talking with our financial management QSMO partners this afternoon. And so we'll be sharing some of what I'm going to present to you here, sharing that with them as well. But what is common across the 4 QSMOs is a requirement to establish a marketplace of quality shared solutions. And we're each working together to kind of learn from each other. Everyone's kind of at a different stage of the maturity of the development of this marketplace. But we're trying to, where it makes sense to do so and where we can, present information in a similar way. Or, for example, you might have heard my colleagues talk about a QSMO validated solution. That concept of a validation and a little check mark is something that we collaborated with the other QSMOs on. And so at least one of the other QSMOs, when they create their marketplace and execute their validation process, we're going to have a similar representation of the completion of that validation process. But the intention of the marketplace is to bring additional transparency into what's available in the grants shared service space. And that could be an IT solution or it could be a non-technical service. We are working towards getting a better understanding of cost and pricing, because that's not the same thing necessarily. Better understanding of what the existing service providers, and I should point out we're talking federal service providers at this point, what their existing offerings actually provide across the grants lifecycle. So if you're familiar with the Federal Integrated Business Framework, or FIBF or FIBF for grants management, we're organizing our offerings, and our marketplace will reflect that, what each of these eventually QSMO validated providers or solutions, what they actually can offer as it aligns to the segments and activities within the grants lifecycle. So really excited to be able to have that level of granularity and detail for people when you come to our marketplace. And really the big piece of it is part of our ongoing engagement with federal agencies, which is to understand what an agency's requirements are and then crosswalk them basically to what is available, what is actually available today and what will be available in the future, and then do that comparison of those requirements versus what's available. So that kind of is a bit of a matchmaking role, but it also helps us intervene with an agency to make sure that they don't go down the path of an investment that maybe there's already something that exists that's available to them that might meet their requirements. And if there's not, then we support the agency in having a well-informed and strategic investment that aligns to a lot of our guiding principles and the data standards for grants management, all sorts of stuff. So what we have here in the middle of the slide, the marketplace 1.0 over to 3.0, you heard Chad say during his segment that we have just recently launched our grants QSMO marketplace validation process, or MVP. So that launched on September 30th, and we have given our existing federal shared service providers who are open to new customers, we have given them a questionnaire with some important questions that drive at things that we're trying to accomplish and provide transparency into via our marketplace. Cost, price, what do you offer, what parts of the grants life cycle do you address? Change control board, how do you communicate changes, how do you communicate new releases, all that kind of stuff. So we've asked them And we've been working very closely with them over the last couple of years. So they contributed to the development of this questionnaire, but we've given them till November 1st to provide those responses. And then the Grants QSMO will review those responses. I'm sure there'll be quite a bit of back and forth with each of those service providers to make sure we fully understand and have a full appreciation of the great work each provider is doing and providing to all of their customers, but also understand where there are opportunities for potential improvement. So where we are on this time frame is we are right kind of at the intersection between Marketplace 1.0 and 2.0. We're in the process of making that transition. So when we have completed this marketplace validation process, then these providers will become a Grants QSMO validated solution. They will be onboarded to our marketplace, and the actual marketplace itself, we're working right now. We have information that's a static catalog that's available on OMB Max, which if you have a government PIV card or CAP card, you can access that information, but eventually we want to make this publicly available. So that is something we're working towards. That information, once we get to Marketplace 2.0, it will be more interactive than just, a two-dimensional static list of offerings. But the future state of it is much more interactive, potentially having user profiles and having a tool that actually compares the requirements you can submit against what's actually available as an offering on the marketplace. But that's 5 to 7 years down the road. But as you heard Chad say, marketplace validation process just launched at the close of the last fiscal year. So within this first quarter of fiscal year 22, we expect to have our first likely award management solution as the first QSMO validated solution onboarded to our marketplace. And then the others that we're working with, we hope to have them onboarded by the close of the second quarter of FY22. Next slide, please. I should also note, we are working on a federal marketplace. We may eventually get to, once we get through the first kind of series of important goals and deliverables, we may consider creating a commercial marketplace. So right now, because it's a federal marketplace, we're predominantly focusing on our federal customers, but that does not stop our engagement with recipients, applicants at the state or local level. So the commercial marketplace, if and when that is established, that might be something that is available to applicants and recipients from states, for example. So we'll keep you posted and stay tuned to future presentations from us, but we are still very interested in understanding what their current challenges are so that we can inform all of our strategic roadmap activities and make sure that we're being responsive to your needs as well as those of the federal government. I think I've covered all this, so we can jump forward. Sorry. Okay, so next slide, please. OMB put out a government-wide data call to federal agencies to discuss their agency-specific level of readiness for this transition from DUNS to UEI, which if you're not familiar with it, please go to the links at the bottom of this slide. Definitely something you need to understand. But I think what is also emerging is we're looking as a community to get a better understanding of what level of readiness the applicant and recipient community has for this transition. So I think that's a big discussion topic we're interested in hearing from you on. Let's jump to the next slide. I think this is where we tee up this question. But from your perspective, so we're interested in hearing from all of you, but in particular from those of you who are recipients. What risks or impediments do you see with your entity's ability to successfully prepare for and then execute this transition from the DUNS number to UEI? And how would you describe your level of readiness? So I'll just pause there to see if you're able to put any comments or questions in chat. And while you're all thinking about how to answer that question, there's a question in chat that's from an earlier topic. Someone manages multiple federal systems, each with different end users. When one of our end users resigns and another is hired to replace them, does your system allow me to see which systems I would need to remove and add the end user? So kind of a role authentication situation. So Andrea, you want to comment on that one? I think it's related to the RUF.
Yes, I think it is. And this is something that came up a lot during our FTP sessions last week. So we're sort of pulling all that information together, and we'll definitely add this in. Unfortunately, it's not authentication, it's authorization. You definitely have to work within the confines of cybersecurity rules. I know that's something that's playing a role. We've heard lots of complaints that you don't log in, let's say within 30 days, you lose your access, and it's creating tons of issues because maybe you only do the work quarterly. I will note, don't have the answer yet. We are willing to say when we don't know. We put it actually on a discussion topic. We have multiple one-on-ones coming up this month, and so it's something that we'll definitely bring up. First, we have our meeting with ASAP actually the end of this week, and so we just plan to talk to them about it. We've heard that problem a bit with the recent implementation with Injustice. So I don't have the answer. I know it's on the top of everyone's minds. Some of this roles-based authorizations, it's really difficult because actually the software owners are the ones who define roles. And so that's really hard for me to standardize, and then which would allow me to have an easier way to manage role authorization. So not that you needed all that background, but it's a tricky problem to solve. If any of you have ideas of how to solve it, I am very open, but we are aware of it and we are discussing it, if that helps.
And I see three regarding the UEI transition. The change to UEI is an inconvenience, but not an obstacle or barrier. That's very good to hear. Our agency is ready, and sub-recipients are likely ready too, since UEIs are already available to them in their SAM.gov accounts. Also glad to hear that. Another point of perspective, not ready. This transition puts states in a bad position in handling their pass-throughs because they now have to capture the new number from the recipients. So I think it's good to know that there's kind of a mix of positions for whoever provided this last comment. If you're willing to share a little bit more information here, or you can always reach out to us via our Grants QSMO mailbox, which is grants, plural, grants QSMO at hhs.gov. Would be interested in learning a little bit more about that. I think in particular, I know I remember in discussions about potential changes in the past that there might be at the recipient level particular fields that are hard coded. And so I think that was a concern that I had for all of you. Is that something that is applicable to you, or is this less of a challenge? So, so Jeff, I see your time check. I think sure we're able to wrap up. We can just go to the next slide. Again, this is not your only bite at the Grants QSMO apple. You can always reach out to us, grantsqsmo at hhs.gov, which is there on the top line there for number 1. But we are always interested in hearing about whatever your thoughts, concerns, pain points, goals, great ideas, thoughts about good innovation efforts that are underway that we might not know about. We would love to hear about them. We do pull all that information together, and we have a Grants QSMO collaboration space currently on OMB Max. Eventually would like to make it publicly available, but Max is, it's free. And so that's what we're using for the moment. But please take a look. If you do have the ability to access OMB Max, the link to that collaboration space, that's that link there. That's our Grants QSMO collaboration page. And I see one more comment. We are set and have integrated UEI into our grants management system alongside DUNS. When we switch over, we'll switch to UEI only. So bravo. For those of you who are in that position, very, very happy to hear that. If you are not in that position and are willing to share more information with us, we'd love to hear from you. Particularly which agencies you interact with on the federal side. So, any other questions or feedback from attendees?
I'd actually like to ask one question, and this is actually not from my own purposes, but from some other folks. So it looks like the QSMO is focusing kind of a lot on application and pre-award and kind of payments. A couple of grant recipients have asked about post-award, and one of them, let's hold them nameless for the moment, said, I get grants from multiple funders, 3 or 4 or 5, and I actually pretty much kind of perform one kind of activity, and I have to provide post award, reporting about how much activity I provided and what the results are, different types of information in different formats, occasionally even with different time snapshots to the different grantors. So my question is, that hasn't really been part of the QSMO's focus so far, or has it? And might it be in the future, thinking about kind of post-award?
So I'll take the first chop of that, and that'll let Andre, our solutions lead, speak to it. So Jeff, you sort of, to make sure you capture, you sort of reference, it seems like we've been focused on pre-award and payments and et cetera. Actually, so I would say we've been focused at the QSMO on three things. Standing up the core QSMO functions, right? Making sure that we actually deliver on the marketplace that we need to deliver on pursuant to OMB's designation of us as the grants QSMO, which will enable us to actually have that governance role to modernize the shared services space. It also gives us the role to actually drive better delivery of advice and support to agencies on their systems investments. And there's a lot of work we've been doing with agencies today, really to build relationships to make sure they know we're not just a stick here to force them to take action. We're here to help give them better advice, to help drive better decision-making about agency system investments. And I think we've done a good job of that today. We're still making sure that we develop those relationships though. And third, in terms of the solution space, I would say we actually focus more on trying to understand what the customer needs are. And there's definitely a lot of needs in the awards management space. And this fiscal year, we're going to do a deeper dive with our federal agency customers on that, just about where are the gaps and where is the demand today, where they're not adopting on their own shared services. You mentioned, though, sort of the post-award, and that is definitely on our near-term roadmap. We first really needed to get, I think, some of our core functions stood up, but something we have specifically talked about, and even in the context of using our recipient user experience web portal and dashboard, Andre mentioned using it as a platform. One of the things we specifically envision as an enhancement, a future enhancement, if we're successful, if we can get money, and if we're successful in building out and delivering that system, and it has the believed results we can get from it, next phase and next focus is absolutely focusing on a way to improve reporting for recipients. It is probably the biggest single pain point we hear in terms of maybe not, that just, it's the most common thing they are concerned about and where they could use assistance. So it's definitely on our near term, but there are some other fundamental steps in terms of our operations and giving us a platform to do that, to focus on first. But I'll let Andrea speak as well.
Yeah, I would say also as folks are moving to shared services, many of the payment systems, specifically ASAP and PMS, have implemented a more automated way to submit your SF425. That just went live this year. I know there were some bumps in the road, but we're working with them to fix that. So that's one thing related to post-award, not us that we're doing, but in our encouragement of shared services, it does move the needle there. And as Chad already mentioned, again, once we can centralize that recipient connection point, I think that it allows a lot of opportunity. The thing is, sometimes we need policy to drive standardization. The good news there, though, Nicole Waldeck over at OMB has been leading a really great effort around a performance playbook. So hopefully that will also help us drive and push standardization.
Great. So I want to say it's 10 o'clock. Thank you very much, Chad and Andrea and Mary Beth, for coming and sharing your wisdom and your experience and your plans and successes with us. And thank you for doing the work, especially on behalf of the grantees and working to reduce grantee burden. I think that's something that's really important to a lot of folks. Just a couple of last comments. One is we can put it in the chat, but we will share the slides afterwards with all the folks who registered for this, and that includes information about how to contact the grants email address. Last, I want to mention again that we are both launching the survey starting in early November. We're also planning another one of these regular grants breakfast series with George Washington University. And what I'm trying to do is to get someone to either talk about the very fast-paced launch of a new grant program, because I think that would be interesting to some other agencies. The alternative would be the potential kind of experience with the payroll protection program, which is a kind of a newfangled beast, which is essentially something that was originally a loan that might be turned into a grant, and which had a bunch of kind of pretty inexperienced grantees. So I think those are a couple of topics, but I would encourage anybody who's attending to say, hey, I'd really like to hear about some other topic. And if you name the topic or name the agency or name the person, we're happy to help try and bring those folks to here to contribute to the grants management community. So on behalf of both George Washington University and REI Systems, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you in the audience for joining us and for your participation in the grants management community. Bye-bye.